So we've heard wonderful things about the Seine and ways of thinking about water. And what I thought would be helpful to do here is to talk a little bit about different ways to think about heritage, because heritage is often understood more as a leisure time activity, place to visit for tourism, perhaps and to protect as an object that simply seen for its aesthetic value. But really, it has a lot more that goes into heritage, and that heritage provides, in a sense, and it's for us to benefit, as Carola mentioned, from learning from the past and seeing how this can really help us going forward. So I'm going to focus a little bit on the relationship between the city and the river, looking at it historically and seeing it from the wider lens of sustainable development and climate resilience, sort of as a way going forward. So I really, and thank you again to Carola for this really very, very important topic that is bringing together in this multidisciplinary way these different ways of looking at the river and the city. So I want to start a little bit by talking about the concept of heritage itself as something that has evolved and something that now looks at the diverse cultural approaches and the recognition of the indivisibility of the social, cultural, economic, geographic, and natural relationships as fundamental to heritage. So it's not just looking at the built heritage, the structures around, but the river itself as heritage and the landscape around it as heritage. And that's the relationship that we want to talk about. And as I mentioned earlier, the UNESCO 2011 recommendation on the historic urban landscape. And for those who might not be familiar, actually, there's several levels of international agreements that UNESCO then serves as a secretariat for. The first is a convention, which is the World Heritage Convention, you're very familiar with. It's something that all states parties actually, or the states parties have to actually ratify, and then it's legally binding. Recommendations are not legally binding, but are nevertheless still adopted by the member states. And so this recommendation was adopted by 195 member states of UNESCO. So it has an incredible power in being an instrument that allows a certain way of thinking, a certain approach to be implemented. And as an innovative standard setting instrument, the HUL recommendation is really about integrating heritage conservation with urban development plans and processes to manage and to protect heritage values, as well as all of the related values that I mentioned. So that in the case of World Heritage, the outstanding universal value is then protected within this larger context of all of the different relationships and the interconnections. So in this sense, it allows the connection between heritage protection and the SDGs, or the Sustainable Development Goals, or the New Urban Agenda goals, which are all objectives which cities are obliged to follow and do follow. So this becomes a way by which it becomes a heritage-centered approach to sustainable development, to climate resilience, so that heritage is not something apart from it, but is very much at the heart of it. So the HUL recommendation, as I mentioned earlier, is fundamentally an approach that is the World Heritage center, the World Heritage Cities Program, a program that is monitored by the World Heritage Committee, takes at its heart. This program is very much built on it. There's a short clip.
Which have been handed down over time, whether centuries or just a few decades. Heritage is not just monuments. A city is not a monument. The built environment, its natural setting, and cultural practices of the local communities are together what makes cities and settlements across the world unique and diverse. Historic cities have evolved over time. They are repositories of collective knowledge and identity whose value is not in its grand monuments alone but in its urban fabric. Historic places consist of many things: the natural setting of a town, its skyline, streets, ordinary houses, unique methods of using local stone or brick, specialized carpentry or ironwork, waterfronts, gardens, plazas, and public spaces, markets and vendors, processions and celebrations, traditional music, dance, and crafts. All come together in historic places. These different layers of the urban landscape are knit closely together, making historic places vibrant, livable, and people-centered. The identity of historic urban areas, their spirit of place, and these different layers of the urban landscape must be protected as a whole. Every element and layer is important, and so are its connections to the others. But cities grow and change. How should everyday settlements across the world preserve their urban heritage as they develop? Should historic places preserve every ordinary house and square while also building roads and shopping centers? This seems like a dilemma where one must choose between conflicting demands. On the one hand, cities, even historic ones, must develop, grow, and change. On the other hand, urban heritage must be preserved for its uniqueness and identity. The Hull approach is meant for plans and policies made with heritage. Urban heritage makes cities more resilient, safe, inclusive, sustainable, people-centered, and livable. The Hull approach is a holistic way of making cities better. Become an advocate for implementing Hull in your city.
Thank you. There was an animation that went with it, but that's all right. I think we can see it.
Urban heritage.
I think that's the animation. But Carola mentioned that there are several instruments, several tools that UNESCO has been developing. And I'm not going to go into the Urban Heritage Atlas today, but we'll talk more about it tomorrow. But I want to talk about some of the other tools that we have. One of them being that's related to the World Heritage Convention is the policy for the integration of a sustainable development perspective into the processes of the World Heritage Convention. And this becomes a very important guide. This serves as an important guide to harnessing the potential of World Heritage properties and heritage in general to contribute to sustainable development and increase its effectiveness and relevance with and for the places through the World Heritage Convention. So the implementation then of the World Heritage Convention is not just for the preservation of the heritage itself, but actually with the larger objective of the heritage serving as a support or a tool for the wider goals of sustainable development. So there are four key dimensions within this framework. One is on environmental sustainability, a second on inclusive social development, a third on inclusive economic development of the local communities, and then the fourth is on the fostering of peace and security. So all of these become the wider goals. So many of the things that Carola was showing in the number of different sort of values then fall into some of these four areas. And so that becomes a way by which this framework and this way of thinking means that heritage is very much connected and should be connected to these larger goals. If you look also at climate change, one of the things that a major focus of the Sustainable Development Goals and otherwise in the international agreements is on the need for urgent action to combat climate change. And climate change is today one of the most significant threats to World Heritage properties, including their integrity, their authenticity, and their local communities to meet their needs for their economic and social development. And the impacts of climate change on World Heritage has been brought to UNESCO's attention for a number of years, and most recently in 2024, this was an update was adopted to the World Heritage Policy that had been there since 2007. So the World Heritage Center's newly adopted, updated policy document on climate action for World Heritage assists states parties with the implementation of climate action. It provides a pathway to utilize synergies between the World Heritage Convention and the UNFCCC and other multilateral agreements. And it provides an outcome-oriented policy framework for the development of goals and targets at national and regional and at the level of local heritage as well. And and really throughout it aims to galvanize urgent action in support of transformative change. A supporting product of the policy document is the forthcoming capacity building toolkit for climate action for World Heritage. And the World Heritage Center, together with the 3 advisory bodies of ICROM, ICOMOS, and IUCN, are developing this toolkit as their sort of first joint toolkit to support states, parties, and site managers to integrate climate action in the management and strategies of UNESCO World Heritage Sites. So I'm jumping now to talk a little bit more about the climate crisis and how it's particularly critical for cities. And where, and now I'm connecting the water with the climate crisis and cities, where half of the world's population resides in cities, and more than half of the world's population. 90% of world's cities are coastal and likely to be impacted by climate change, including sea level rise, stormwater surges, flooding, and other climate-related disasters. So, but however, World Heritage properties are also important repositories of knowledge for countering climate change and often hold the key to adaptation strategies that have been accumulated over generations. Cultural heritage can convey traditional knowledge that inspires innovations and provides lessons and tools for sustainable futures. And World Heritage cities remind us that low carbon urbanism can be a norm and was the norm, and that action towards mitigation and adaptation solutions are valuable for conservation. So in the face of the many challenges posed by climate change, it's essential to reconsider the relationship between residents, built heritage, and water. And Paris provides some very important lessons as a river city, and as mentioned previously, several other examples of heritage-based water management solutions can be seen also, as I mentioned earlier, on the World Heritage Canopy platform, a platform that was developed by the World Heritage Center with the support of the generous support of the Netherlands, and is a living platform of innovative solutions that aims to inspire and guide actions, local actions, through case studies and practical examples. if I look, for example, I'm going to just go through some examples of how we can look at such relationships and how they have benefited, looking at heritage and sustainable development climate action. Here is an example of the Mazhab Valley that was inscribed in 1982 in Algeria. And that it consists of 5 fortified villages, locally called the Sur, along with surrounding palm groves. The Sur forms an extraordinary homogeneous ensemble constituting in the desert the mark of sedentary and urban civilization, possessing the kind of culture that it has developed over time and preserved its cohesion over centuries. Since the 11th century, the valley has conserved practically the same way of life and the same building techniques, ordered as much by a specific social and cultural context as by the need for adaptation to a hostile environment. However, over the past decade, the valley's vulnerability to climate change has increased, with periodic overflow becoming increasingly frequent, triggering a pressuring need to enhance its risk preparedness and the water distribution system. Next. In the Mazhab Valley, traditional water management systems include both tangible and intangible components. A community organization manages and channels the water infrastructure that controls water flow. Given the periodic overflow of the river, traditional settlements were designed to prevent damage by flooding floodable areas near the river that was occupied only by temporary structures and not by dwellings. The abandonment of this planning practice in recent years led to increased vulnerability to flooding. Next, please. So, in order to preserve and enhance the traditional environmental knowledge, the Office for the Protection and Promotion of the Mazhab Valley was developed, and its focus has been on awareness raising and education programs promoting local communities' involvement in the preservation and management of the built space. The produced educational material included inventories, guides, and brochures on traditional techniques for construction, maintenance, and restoration of traditional building and water management systems. These learning materials are accompanied by capacity building workshops directed towards technical officers, developers, technical services, etc. And furthermore, they have developed exhibitions and so on. And this has resulted a lot in much improvement in the water management practices that are now officially carried out through the offices. I want to talk about another example, which is in Vietnam, in the Hue, in the city of Hue, where the complex of the Hue monuments is an outstanding example of an Eastern feudal capital with its layout and landscape designed on the ecological principles, including sophisticated systems of water management and disaster risk reduction. The Hue region is frequently hit by typhoons during the monsoon season. And because of this, local communities developed resilient technologies and in order to cope with climate-related disasters and recover from the impact in a flexible way. These advanced systems of environmental design and water management in harmony with nature were designed to bring nature and tradition and bring together nature and tradition and were adapted to local climate and topography. And the environmental design technology managed together with local communities has proven to be sophisticated and resilient to natural disasters, providing an alternative to modern engineering and construction technologies. Next, please. In Hue's hot, humid climate characterized by periodic floods, water management plays a fundamental role in the life of the city. During the monsoon season, the hydraulic system needs to cope with very large amounts of rainfall in short periods. It's essential to facilitate water flow, infiltration, and management, and this has been achieved by a combination of natural features and also human technologies such as canals and irrigation systems. The surrounding countryside was carefully designed with ponds, canals, and other flood control systems that shape the landscape and serve as irrigation systems for the rice fields and farmland that coexist in the areas neighboring the monument and the royal monuments of the royal complexes. Next, please. So these artificial lakes around the imperial tombs function as water retention basins, and the water stored in the lakes during the rainy season is later used to irrigate the agricultural fields near the tombs. If the rainfall exceeds the capacity of the lake, the overflowing water accumulates in the surrounding rice fields and then flows out into the Perfume River. These agricultural systems include irrigation, and these were traditionally managed by local communities living around them. And historic records show that this symbiosis was devised since they were the conception of the monument projects. So these are, some examples that are now being taken forward. I want to move now to look at examples also here in Europe, where you see this is the city of Bamberg, which is an outstanding example and representative of the early medieval town in Central Europe that is both in its plan and its surviving buildings. The Lower Mills district is located in the heart of the town of Bamberg, and the ensemble once consisted of 5 medieval mills. Next, please. On a detailed map of the town in 1602, several water wheels along the river testify to the use of hydropower, while the continuous presence of mills in the river in the city center was not described as the criteria for the inscription of Bamberg, the town of Bamberg, to the World Heritage. The mills are located within the site boundaries, and the usage of water power in a small scale has historical roots in the area of the city. As part of Bamberg policies to shift to 100% renewable energy by 2030, a proposal was made to resume hydroelectric power generation at the site of the former water wheels and the water mills, combined with a building to house a World Heritage Visitor Center. And on the site of the former mills, a new building was erected in 2016, incorporating the structural remains of the historic mill. So these are some examples, and I'm just going to now skip forward a little bit on the sandstone blocks of the Stetzer mill, that you see the physical elements. So it's a modern technology that has made possible the potential for public-private partnerships to contribute to sustainable urban development and to enhance environmental sustainability, as well as the contribution of historic practices for renewable energy production and finding solutions for energy production in cities. I think this is my last example is in Grand Bassam in southeastern Côte d'Ivoire, on a narrow strip of land between the Atlantic Ocean and the Guadeloupe Lagoon. Grand Bassam was the first port, economic, and judicial capital of Côte d'Ivoire, and it bears witness to the complex social and spatial relations between Europeans and Africans, and to the subsequent independence movement as and as a vibrant center of the territory and French trading posts of the Gulf of Guinea, which preceded modern Côte d'Ivoire, it attracted a lot of populations from around Africa and the Mediterranean and the Levant. The strategic location of the historic city between the lagoon and the ocean made it essentially vulnerable to natural disasters or disasters from natural hazards. In October of 2019, next please, the very heavy rainfall led to overflow in the Comoé River and its tributaries, causing flooding in the village of Nzima and producing substantial material damages. In response, Côte d'Ivoire put in place a crisis management system, relocating the affected population and providing them support, but also requesting UNESCO for emergency mission. And due to the long history of natural hazards in Hambassam, the local communities had developed intangible heritage practices that helped the community stay together at moments of disaster. After the 2019 floods, the local Nzima community engaged in customary crisis management and processes through traditional leaders and the priestesses of the warriors of the king. And through these traditional rituals to ward off, there was a sense of common goals and community goals that were established, and capacities were built for engaging in responding to these risks. And at the same time, it is so essential to strengthen the local and the vulnerable populations to these disasters. So they have undertaken some very key, next please, efforts towards ensuring the integrating the heritage values of the site with social economic needs of local residents, focusing particularly on the reinforcement of legal and institutional frameworks for the protection of the heritage, improving community involvement in World Heritage Management, and awareness raising and education activities, as well as development of cultural tourism that integrates and looks at this kind of private-public partnership to lead the development of infrastructure that is then aimed at bringing together the traditional knowledge for the contemporary, addressing contemporary issues. I think I'm going to stop here, but I could. It's okay? Okay, then I'll share one more example with you, which is in the town of Djenné, which is in Mali, is an example of a city affected by flooding. And you can imagine in a city that is built of earth, where flooding can really have an enormous impact. This is a case that is included on the Urban Heritage Atlas that showcases the unique architecture and flood adaptive techniques. Sustainable architecture is evident in Djenné's iconic structures that are built from mud brick and exemplify sustainable, locally sourced construction methods that are tailored to the city's flood-prone environment, where nearly all of the buildings in the town, including the Great Mosque, are made from this kind of sun-baked earth that is coated with mud plaster from the river. The adobe bricks are made on the riverbank using a wooden mold and a mixture of earth and chopped straw. And the city's maintenance involves community rituals, including annual mosque plastering and fostering social cohesion and community pride. And the earthen architecture in Djenné and the flood adaptive techniques highlight the resilience embedded in these traditional techniques. So I would like to really conclude now by mentioning a UNESCO publication on the subject, which is River Culture: Life as a Dance to the Rhythm of Waters, published in 2023. And while we know that 84% of freshwater fauna has disappeared between 1970 and 2014, the loss of cultural diversity connected to river and the floodplain, and the possible link with this is also equally important. And I want to recall here also that one of the publications, another publication of UNESCO recently, or where UNESCO was a co-lead, is a UNFCCC publication on non-economic losses in the context of climate change, where cultural heritage, the loss of cultural heritage, is recognized now as a non-economic loss. And so I think that all of these are different sources, and I just want to end by talking about the historical human relationships and ensuring that we can really build on these to strengthen them and to learn from the past to connect for the future with these. Thank you very much.